All right, welcome to week 2 of Built for More podcast with myself, Denny Thompson. I'm on with Pastor Joby Martin as well. Joby, we're kind of like, this is our first guest, and I don't really know where we go from here. This is literally like the king of college football
I love it.
as our first guest on this podcast. So I'm probably going to need your help on the next guest to stay in this league, bro.
Yeah, I don't. Whatever. We can just keep having Kirk back. I got a lot of questions about college football.
So obviously, Kirk Herbstreit is joining us. Kirk and I have gotten to know each other over the last couple of years. Somebody that I actually consider a friend of mine, and got to know his family. And Kirk, I appreciate you so much for coming on, man.
Of course, yeah, man. You brought this up last week, and happy to hop on here, talk some football, and talk about whatever you guys want to get into.
Well, that's the thing. Like Joby is one of the biggest college football fans I think that exist on the planet right now. He
Good
is
for him.
tried and true to the Georgia Bulldogs, and I don't want to steal your thunder, Joby, but if you want to kind of confess your love to Kirk here, the floor is yours.
Oh my gosh, yeah, dude. I watch you every Saturday. You're the best too. I have so many questions. Like,
Yeah.
I would be the worst commentator in the history of the world because you played at Ohio State. Is that right? Am I right?
Yeah.
So how do you not just love all over them all the time? Like you kind of keep it right down the middle. I couldn't do that. I'd be like, refs, what it, you know?
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, I don't know. I started out in local radio in Columbus. So I played at Ohio State. I got done. Didn't do the NFL. Was very, very determined when I got done playing. I did not want to be a guy. When I played, there was a thing called the World League. So you had guys in Arena League. So if guys didn't go to the NFL, it's like they couldn't let go, and they would keep bouncing around. And I just didn't want to be that guy. I was like, okay, if I go to the NFL, great, it's a dream. If not, cut it. Let's go find something to do. Find that kind of that next chapter. And so for me, I did local radio. My first job, I made $12,000. Had no idea, what it was going to lead to. Didn't really have any goals. Here I am, a dad of 4 boys, talking to them and trying to get them focused on the right things. But I didn't really have that. I just kind of stumbled into local radio and did that for about probably 15 years. But the first year or two that I get into it, I put an audition tape out and went to ESPN. And what I learned really early, Joby, was it's one thing to be in Columbus, Ohio, talking about the Buckeyes or the Browns or the Bengals or the Reds. There's a little bit of a we kind of tone to it. But when you go on a national network, you can't sound like, you're talking to your Columbus audience. You have to act, like if you want to grow in the business, you have to talk like you're talking to the country. And the goal would be for them never to know where you went to school.
Is your heart still for the Buckeyes though? Like when you're live, like you're dying up there?
I am. No, I'm not dying. Like it's like I flip a switch during the game. Like when you put so much work into something with your prep, of course, if you're just going to ask me, am I a fan? Oh my God, I'm like you. I'm the biggest college football fan you'll ever meet. I feel like I could go toe to toe with anybody on a national level. Probably for the last 40 years, I feel like I could talk with somebody, whether they're a Miami Hurricane or a Georgia Bulldog. I mean, whoever it is. I take a lot of pride in trying to know everybody, but I love Ohio State. I was a captain there. My dad was a captain there. It's just the way I grew up. And but when I call their games, man, they're a team, and the other team's a team, and I'm there to give analytical viewpoints and try to give the viewer at home kind of the how and the why of how things are happening during a game. So
are there teams that you dislike? Because I hate the Buckeyes.
No,
like I despise them.
But
Here's when I knew we were.
I understand that, though. I mean, I think Tate Rutledge came out recently and said something about that, and I could. I mean, I know Ohio State's fan base is probably as loud as any fan base in the country on social media.
Oh yeah,
and they a lot of that fraction are not fans of mine because I am fair and because I am objective.
Yeah. So well, here's when I knew we were in trouble. I knew we were in trouble this year as the Bulldogs.
Yeah.
Beginning of the year, it's like, summer practice or whatever. and like 15 Ohio State guys get saved and baptized and are wearing Jesus one
Oh
shirts to
yeah.
practice.
Oh
And
yeah.
as a pastor, I thought, oh no,
Yeah.
we don't.
Yeah.
They're already good. I don't need the hand of God on them too. I
Yeah.
need
Yeah. They
them to be
reported the
criminals.
camp. They reported the camp with Jesus shirts, and it was legit. Like
I know. So then I
um,
kind of had to sort of root for him a little bit. I hated that part.
You know
yeah.
what? He's actually not even kidding about that, Kirk, because I remember talking to him about that. He's like, "Man, have you seen this? Like, we're in trouble." And this was back in, like he said, August or September. You know,
Yeah.
the interesting thing though, Joby, about like Kirk is really college football to the extent of when you look at the depth. He mentioned his dad played at Ohio State, captain of a team. Wasn't he a coach as well,
Yeah, he
Kirk?
coached with Woody and with Bo. He went from being in those days you didn't GA, so he was a captain. And back in those days, he went both ways. He was a running back and a defensive back, started both ways. And the very next year, he was the defensive back coach. Like,
Wow.
yeah, I mean, he
Wow.
if he would have stayed in the business, he would have been a rock star. But
So then, in addition to that, you've got Kirk playing at Ohio State. You've got um, two sons that played at Clemson. You've got another son that just won a national championship at Ohio State. He's married. His wife was a cheerleader at Ohio State. Am I right on that, Kirk?
yeah,
And now
yeah,
he's got another son going to Michigan to play quarterback. Like
yeah,
this guy is college football. Like
yeah.
it really is at the fabric of not just their family, but I mean, I've been around him enough to know like this is a guy that just loves the game of college football. Can you expand on that? I know that's a general question, Kirk, but like what is it about college football that just I don't even know how to describe it. You're just passionate about.
Probably other than my family, it's the thing I'm most passionate about. I just from a very young age, I just got into whether it was Georgia and Florida with Lindsey Scott, watching that live as a kid in Ohio, and watching Texas play Oklahoma as a kid. Obviously, Ohio State and teams like that, USC, UCLA. It was just something. There's pictures of me when I was 6, 7, 8 years old, just staring at the TV, and it didn't matter who was on. It was something about the energy in a college football stadium that captured me, the marching bands that captured me, the pom poms, just something different about it. I'm talking when I was young, and then when I got around it, I think just being around, doing college game day, and whether you're in Georgia or Austin, Texas, or wherever you go, everybody's tailgating and having their own traditions, and I just find that really interesting and fun. I do the NFL now as well, and it's almost like it's a different sport, the NFL from college. When I talk about the energy around these stadiums, I think it's a real sense of community at these college stadiums. I'm really drawn to that. And I just think the games on Saturday, there's just so much energy, despite all of us on the outside. It seems like everyone's trying to destroy the sport with all these changes. But when you turn on a Saturday and you just take it in, and you listen to the marching bands in the background and the players and the uniforms and the colors, it's just my thing. Some people are into music, some people are into different things, but college football my whole life is just I've just really gravitated towards it. NFL, I watch guys that I covered that then go on to play in the NFL, and I kind of cheer for them as individuals to do well. And now covering them when I see them on the field in pregame and they see me, it's almost like they've seen a relative from they haven't seen in about 5 years, and it's like a family reunion on the sideline. So I don't really get enamored with the NFL the way I do college. I enjoy it. I love doing what I do, but the college game for me is just has always been like you, Joby. Like you're into Georgia. I'm into the way you were into Georgia about the whole sport. Like I just can't get enough of it. It's basically shoot it into my veins.
Well, the nature of the game is so different too in college because like every game is the most important game in the world. It's a little bit different with the 12-team playoff. But look, I live in Jacksonville, so I'm a Jaguar. So you want to talk about two totally different sets of expectations between a Saturday and a Sunday,
Yeah,
but you can go 8-8 and still end up
yeah,
winning it all in the league. So it's very, very, very different. And I do think, man, as like just a guy sitting on his couch, and we're not here to just blow smoke, but the your your love of the game you just seem like a regular dude that it comes across to us. I mean, I know you're an expert and you've got firsthand experience by being a big time college quarterback and all that, but it still comes across more like you're a fan that just knows everybody and knows everything. And I take another thing that did that for you. When you started bringing your dogs on,
Yeah.
I was like, this is great. Of course, this guy has dogs and just brings them on the
Here you
field.
go. Here you go. Right here. That's Ben.
Accessibility
That's
shortcuts.
a Ben's blanket that somebody
Yeah.
sent me.
Use the
That's
chat
Uh-oh,
feed
hold
to
on.
navigate.
What
And
happened
press
here?
space to toggle an option.
Whoops. Are you guys still with me?
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're
we're
good.
here.
Okay.
Yep.
There's my dog. One of my dogs. This is Theo. He's laying on a blanket that someone sent me, a Ben,
That is
and
awesome.
that's him just laying there. So whenever I'm working, they're usually in here just kind of hanging out with me. So yeah, my dogs are. I take them down to Denny and Will whenever Chase goes down to throw, and they're like part. Oh, here's the one everyone knows now. Peter, he's over here sleeping. I don't know if you can see him.
Big
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
There's Mitch right there. Just came. So those are my three dogs.
The whole crew.
This is
Well, I'm
pretty
just
much what
telling
I.
you, it
This is what I-
translates to an average guy in Jacksonville, Florida. It translates.
Well, let me tell you this, Joby. You know, when you talk about what you do for a living, you said you're a quarterback and you're an expert and all that. I don't really look at myself like that. It has nothing to do with. Yeah, I played, but I mean, I played so long ago. What I do, and it's probably if you're getting ready to do a sermon, like you're an expert in this field, but I bet you when you're getting ready to talk, I bet you do a lot of prep that week to be able to do your presentation. And so when you get up there in front of people, you want to feel really good about the word, even though you already know the word. I bet
Sure.
you that week, whatever your message is, I bet, man, you are drilling it. And by the time you get up there in front of the people, my guess is there's even a certain more confidence that you have because of the amount of time that you spent on being able to provide, you know, a lesson for people to be like, oh my gosh, that clicks. I get it.
Yeah.
I feel the exact same way with football. It has nothing to do with playing. I don't consider myself an expert. I just consider myself a guy that spends, I don't know, 100 hours a week preparing. So when I go on the air, I'm very impromptu. The way we're talking right now is how I talk when I'm on the air. And I bet you when you get up to talk, you're not probably, you know, giving the message like this. You probably prepared so well that you're looking in people's eyes and you're talking to them and you're teaching. That's exactly what I try to do with college game day, my Thursday night Amazon game, and then the Saturday night game that I call. I look at myself kind of as a teacher, and I'm trying to just stay out of the way. It's not about me. It's about the players, about the play call, it's about the moment. And I just try to be, you know, with my partner, my play-by-play guy, I just try to be there and capture the moment and tell the why and be incredibly prepared. And that preparation gives me confidence. Without that, even though I know the sport and love the sport, I wouldn't be able to go on air and be just a regular guy. I think I'm a regular guy because I'm not reading a prompter. I don't think I'm more important than I am. I am a regular guy, you know, that's how I view myself. And so I just happen to be a guy that spent 100 hours preparing for a broadcast. So that's the only thing that separates me from anyone else. If you guys spend 100 hours and on the phone with whatever, or Zoom with whatever coach or player, like if I'm doing the Jags, you know, I'd have Trevor on a Zoom, you know, I'd have the coaches on a Zoom. I talk to the coordinators. And if they're playing the Titans, I do the same thing with the Titans. I'd be completely dialed in. And by the time we got to the game, man, I feel like let's put the ball in the air. You know, I'm ready to go. And that comes from preparation. It doesn't come from playing or what I did back in the 90s. It comes from this week and being prepared.
I think that I have a top 5 job in the world. I am so incredibly lucky with what I get to do. And Joby and I talked a lot last week. Like the question always comes up, and I can imagine it comes up with you, Kirk, of man, how did you get into this? Right. Like, and you've answered that. But Joby and I think both kind of decided last week that when you're called to do something, like you, whatever you do, you're going to end up doing what God has called you to do. And when you look at your life and your job and where it's grown, and I mean, college game day has become a modern day like football version of the Beatles. I mean, it's such a huge resurgence, and I got to go to so many of these things this year and see just the way you guys work and the way you guys move. Like, looking back, it's probably easy to see that this was a calling for you, Kirk. But at what point, at what age? I know faith is important to you. Did you realize, like, this is pretty cool, that this is what God has called me to do, and I have a responsibility with this?
I think that's a great word, responsibility, because that's what I look at it as. I mean, there's the football part of it. There's the entertainment part of it. College Game Day, when I first started in 1996, this will be my 30th year coming up this fall. When I first started, we'd have, I don't know, 100 people around the set. Corso used to tell one of the stage managers, he'd say, "Hey, see that guy over there with that black hat that kind of has the horns? No, no, not that guy. The other guy next to him. Yeah, that guy. Hey, when I'm going to make my pick, run down there. It'd just be a ball cap that someone made with, hey, go grab that hat." And we were only on for an hour and 100 people around. And he'd make a pick and he'd put a ball cap on and some kind of funky hat. And that's how it started to where it is now, where I mean, it's really like, if you're into country music, it's kind of like a country music act going up on a stage and looking out over just a sea of humanity, of just like you, Joby, college football bonanza, just people that love it. And I look at that as I do look at that as a responsibility. And what bothers me, probably the hardest part of my job, is when people get sideways with me, because I'm not a sideways guy. I don't like conflict. If I say something to upset you, I didn't, in this era of guys that like to say things intentionally to try to upset you, I've never been that guy. I get emotional. I get passionate. Sometimes I say things out of, like you would if you're at home watching Georgia and they throw a pick and you throw your hat at the TV. You have passion for the sport. I have passion for it as well. And so sometimes I really struggle with that part of my job. And sometimes I get to near the end of the year, I'm like, I don't know if I want to do this anymore, just because the negativity that swirls around it. Because that's really not what I like about it. I just want to talk ball. But I do think of this. I do think, from a Christian perspective, whether it's on social media or it's on the air, I do feel that I have a light to shine. I feel that, in this world that's kind of fallen, in this world that's divided, even talking college football, how I handle myself, how I conduct myself, how I talk on the air, I try to be a reflection, of that. And that to me is a way of, like, man, think about how many people I can impact. When you meet somebody and you just meet them and it's like they're high on life, it's like God's coming through their eyes.
Yep.
There's just a permanent smile on their face, like that. And then you walk away from that person and you're just like, wow, that was powerful. Like, it's a challenge to be that person. But that's my goal, to try to be that person, to try to be a light, whether, again, with just my aura, my energy, or if it's with an actual communication with on air or a one-on-one. So that's the way I look at it. I look at it like that. And I look at it as I'm a teacher. Those are the two things that I kind of look at it with my job. And that's a heavy responsibility. Like you said, Denny, going back to your question.
One of the things that I greatly appreciated, I guess this clip was, I don't know how old it is, a year old, 2 years old? I don't know. Went all over YouTube. You're being interviewed, probably right there, have a hat on. And it's where you were like, I don't give two craps about these things anymore. As a Christian, you identified yourself as a Christian. I think what you were saying was,
oh yeah, I remember.
When we started, we were supposed to not talk about race and politics and gender and sexuality and all this. Now everybody's trying to paint us into a corner. And you just boldly proclaimed, as a believer as a Christian, this is what I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
And I don't know, man. I began to pray for you when I saw you on Saturdays, just by identifying yourself as a believer. Also giving people a little bit of perspective about what we're talking about here. At the end of the day, we're still talking about a game. It may be the greatest game ever invented by God, but it's still a game of young men and young women playing in their own leagues, growing up to be men and women. And then you've got that video, and on the other side of it, or not the other side, it's kind of two sides of the same coin, you getting very emotional talking about racism and racial reconciliation in sports. I thought those two things were a beautiful compliment in today's world of what it means to be full of grace and truth. That we're not going to bend to the way of this world, and we're also going to point out where there's injustices and stand for what God had in mind when he created us all equal.
Yeah. Yeah. And what a trying time for us, right? I mean, going back to spring of 20, all the way through these last, 5 years, it's been such a roller coaster ride, and that emotional outburst, which I had no idea was even in me. It just kind of came out. I'm kind of like Dick Vermeil. I'm kind of an emotional guy. I don't know when it's going to come, and I can be watching American Idol, and it could be a guy on that's been living in his car that steps in front of Lionel Richie and Luke and sings a song, and it's beautiful. And he tells a story, and I sit there and start crying. It's just the way I'm wired. I can't help how I'm wired. It's just the way I am. And so, yeah, when I heard some of those stories, really early coming out of COVID, um, I just was blown away. I didn't realize, some of those stories that were being shared really existed. I just didn't know, and so, but then, you keep going through it, and everything has become so political, and everything's become so pick a side, and it's like I'm picking a side of Jesus and of God. It's like you say, it's being loving and trying to be compassionate, having empathy, but at the same time, not just folding over and just taking, okay, whatever you say, I don't want to rock the boat. I think a lot of us for a while there just kind of hid in the background, didn't really know what to do, and we just were quiet. And I think the second interview you're referring to is where I finally got to a point where it's just, I think it was transgen athletes and all this kind of stuff, and I'm just like, man, I'm overwhelmed with how this is being talked about, and just kind of punted. I think live on that interview, I just kind of punted on all of it, and yeah, the feedback I got from that was pretty, and it wasn't intentional. It was just kind of like the way we're talking now, and we just happen to navigate and go down that path, and yeah, it's tricky, man, when you live in the public eye and you don't want to be in the public eye, um, but you have to be true to your beliefs and what you think and what you believe in, and so that's who I try to be. I'm not perfect, obviously. I'm going to make plenty of mistakes, just like everybody, but I try. That's why with my job, I always, especially now at this point, now that we've kind of been through all that, man, like I just want to talk about football and talk about the games, and talk about players who are making big impacts both on and off the field. Denny works with Carson Beck. I did a number of Carson's games this year, and it was like, I don't know if I told you this, Denny. Maybe I texted it with you. Again, going back to how I sit down with players and coaches. So every time I do a Georgia game, they bring in Kirby, they bring in the coordinators, and then they'd bring in two or three players. And almost every time, Carson Beck would be one of those players. And when he would come in, I would just feel, and this might be who he was his whole life. Denny, you'd have to tell me that. But I just would see and feel the weight of the world on this guy's back. And I can't imagine, with the game in the 90s or the early 2000s to now. It's great. NIL's great. Players getting money's great, all this stuff. But you're at Georgia and you're replacing Stetson Bennett. And oh, by the way, all we do now is win national championships. And you're a superior talent to Stetson Bennett. You get in the Lambo, you're getting the money, no problem. Go win 14 or 15 and we'll call it even. And I don't know if the weight of that got to him, but it would have gotten to me. And I think Quinn Ewers went through that at Texas with Arch Manning and all the fuss and talk about that. And any mistake he would make, the crowd, his own crowd, where's Arch? Where's Arch? It's like, geez. And that's a new chapter in this sport. And it's almost like you just wanted to put your arm around Carson Beck when I would get done with these production meetings and just kind of tell him, hey man, it's going to be all right. That's how and we would get into some conversations in those meetings and ask him about how he's doing. And, he told me after I can't remember what game it was. It might've been Alabama. They lost in Tuscaloosa and he got a little emotional about it. He held his tears back, but he's like, I can handle that. But like my mom getting stuff thrown at her or trying to get to the locker room and people yelling and throwing, cussing at her. And that's Georgia fans. It's hard when your own fans are doing that to a college kid, but that's where we are. I don't know how I got on that, but that's where we are.
That's it is crazy, Kirk. It is, having gone through this with Carson, I was going to mention this to you because I was at every game. And when you look at that schedule that Georgia played, the thing that I realized, I wasn't doing anything. I was literally there watching, right? That's all I was doing. And I told Joby last week, by the time we got to Ole Miss, I was exhausted. And so I just cannot imagine playing that schedule as a quarterback on a team that's expected to win every single week. And when you're Georgia and you go to Alabama brings a little something different. That crowd that night was just a different environment. Yeah. And it was like that every single place. The pressure that these guys are under, and nobody feels sorry for them, and I'm not asking anybody to feel sorry for them.
No.
But it is what it is. They are
it's human nature.
In Carson's case, he's 22 now, but a lot of these guys are 19 years old and they're going through that. It's just a super interesting dynamic that I don't think a lot of people get to see behind the scenes.
Where your frontal cortex isn't even developed till you're 25. I mean, not poor guys. They're great. I wish I could have done it, but it is a thing. I mean, perspective is a thing. Yeah. Earlier, Kirk, you were saying everybody wants you to take sides. Dr. Tony Evans, pastor in Texas, he's got this great line. He says, Jesus did not come to take sides. He came to take over. That's the best. So if you just do it his way, you're going to be all right.
Yeah. I love that. That's great.
Hey, as I'm listening to you two, something just kind of occurred to me though, is like both of you guys make a living with the words that you say. And, there's a lot of Bible verses about what comes out of our mouth, matters in a big way. I think, Joby, I was reading this in a Bible study about what comes into your mouth isn't a big deal, but what comes out of your mouth is a very, very big deal. And this is a question for both of you guys. Are you guys aware of that? Like, is in a sense that media is so bad right now and anything can come out of our mouth, that there's something, Kirk or Joby, that you guys can say in one moment that maybe there's somebody halfway around the world that just grabs onto that. That's got to be pretty cool for both of you guys.
Well, here's what's different with social media and the fact that everybody has an account. Now, everybody has an opinion, and everybody is global, instant, and eternal. Like before, if you had an opinion about a ball team, nobody heard you. Now you can post it for everybody. The other thing is, imagine 25 years ago, if you're on your way to work and some random person just yelled at you and was like, you're not good at your job. You'd be like, shut up. Who are you? I don't even know who you are. Now that's everybody on social media every day. And then even worse, it takes a lot less energy to tear down than build up. And so there are all these, sports is the worst. Church is pretty bad too. There are entire people that have created their whole brand on tearing down, and that's all they do. And if you are a chronic skeptic, eventually you're going to be right. And so they just tear down and tear down and tear down. And what we are called to do as believers is speak life, speak love, to lift people up, to find good things to say. The Bible says that in the tongue resides the power of life and death. I think there are coaches that have killed their programs because of their mouth. And there are other coaches that get more out of their guys because they say things that boys and young men can live up to. This is true in our society.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, Joey. So at the beginning of the year, I kind of go into hibernation from the lifestyle that I live in the fall, from February back to August. I kind of lay low, recharge, and it's almost like I have a force field that's like this big when it comes to the negativity that you're talking about, the cynics that are out there just lurking, right? And in late August, September, I'm right about here. And then it gets to be like October, and I'm right here. Then it's November, then it's December, and then it's January. And I find myself to become vulnerable um, to the negativity. I try very hard to pull close to God during those times. Always try to pull close to God, but you know how it is when you're just
Sure.
feeling like the world's caving in on you. And I was at we did a lot of the playoff games, and at the semifinals, there were two of them. One was in Miami at the Orange Bowl. The other one was over in Arlington with the Cotton Bowl. And my dog Peter travels with me since Ben passed away, and I just happened to be walking out of my room. We were at a hotel, JW Marriott down there, and I just happened to be. I was throwing the ball down the hallway, and then I was on my way out, and I walked by a guy who said, "Oh my gosh, hey, how are you?" You know, and now keep in mind it's January, so I went from here. We're in August. I'm like, "Hey man, how you doing?" So now I'm January, and I'm like, "Oh God, is he upset? Is he coming at me with something?" And he was actually incredibly pleasant. We said hello. He said he enjoyed the show, and I just took my dog for a walk. Came back into my room, and it was this. I haven't read this since that day, but there was this note. And when you guys were talking about that, I reached down and it made me think about this. And this is the perspective that you deal with, and it's up to you and what you choose it to kind of plant your own emotions into. This guy just wrote, "Hey, dear Kirk, I met you briefly in the hallway this morning. I want to thank you for your friendly smile on game day every Saturday. You and the crew, Lee, Reese, Desmond, Pat, and Nick, are great additions. Have given me something to look forward to every Saturday. I had stem cell transplant back in 2018. One of the things that got me through years of chemo was looking forward to game day every Saturday. Keep keep doing keep doing what you have done all these years, which is for people like me to get through some tough times. Thank you." And then he said something about, sorry about Ben. But that is what you have to, that's what you plug into. Not the guy's like, "You suck. I can't believe you did this." Like
Totally.
that's what's special.
A question I'll ask is, I wonder what it's like to be on the other side of me. Um, I obviously don't get recognized like you do, but around here, I can't
Mhm.
go anywhere without people stopping me. And I want that to be a good experience for other people, because you never know what they're going through. And there have been people that I wanted to meet, and then I met them, and I thought, man, I wish I didn't meet them, because now I
Yeah.
don't think they're as awesome, you
Yeah,
know?
I've had that. Yeah.
And what you don't realize, Kirk, is that guy sees that clip where you say, as a Christian, I hold to these traditional beliefs. You know, when you were talking about the transgenderism stuff, you just never know how God might use that. Speaking of, one of the things that the whole world has noticed is how you have honored and cared for Lee Corso. It is, I mean, obviously there's stuff going on and all that, but dude, the way that you honor and care for that guy, it teaches a bunch of men in this world how we ought to honor and care for one another instead of looking for a weakness to exploit. You
Yeah.
you look for a place to honor and to respect, and it really just comes through. And I think it's screaming, especially when you tell people you're a believer in Jesus. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to put those things together and say, I
Right.
think the reason he's treating that guy that way is because he has received the love of God. It's a really big deal, man. It's a great
Yeah.
witness.
I probably, the two things that I probably over my career, I've called. The first national championship I called was '08. So every championship since then, I've called more Rose Bowls than I think anybody in the history of the Rose Bowl. And you know what people come up to me and say? They say, "Thanks for what you do with Lee Corso, and I love your dogs." Like those are the two things. It has nothing to do with football, nothing to do with XOs. It's just they, and I think with Lee, it's just he's a friend. It's like, whether he's, well, of course he's older now at 89, and I was just always taught to respect my elders, and you take care of them when you can, and we just happen to be on live national TV,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm sitting right next to him, and I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, as far as, you try to navigate the waters without it looking like you're doing it. It's a little bit tricky, but I'm just doing what, when I first started, I was 26 on College Game Day, and he was helping me, with, I had so many questions, and I'll tell you when it changed for us is I just knew him as a guy I worked with on TV, and then I got married, and then I had my twins. They were born at 28 weeks, and they were 2 pounds each. I could take my ring down their foot all the way up to their hip bone when they were first born, and their skin was transparent, and you could see their organs when they were in the NICU. And I went through that for about 8 weeks. And I'd tell you, the guy that probably got me through that as much as anyone was Lee Corso. We'd be out in LA shooting a commercial, and I'd be in the back of a car. He and I just happened to be alone driving. And he was one of the few people I could open my heart up to, and he would just sit and listen, and then he would have, almost like Yoda or Don Corleone, he would listen and listen and listen. And then he would just have like a sentence after I just poured out 10 or 15 minutes. He would have a sentence or two, and it just kind of gave me clarity. And that happened time after time as the kids became 2 and 3 and 4, because he'd already had kids that were older. And I'd pick his brain on, man, I don't know what to do with this. And he'd be like, and he'd give me another. So that was our relationship off of TV, where we became like that. It's almost like having another dad. And so when he got older and he had a stroke, it was like our relationship switched. And I became the one that was trying to, just do what I could. But yeah, he's my guy, and it has been, since I've been on the show. Like I said, it's just interesting how our roles have went one direction and then the other. But I feel like that's our duty. That's what we should be doing. How you treat him is, in my opinion.
I have a question on the football side of things for you,
Yeah.
Kirk, because we're down here in SEC country. Like, we know Auburn, Alabama rivalry. We know Georgia, Florida rivalry. We know, Florida State, Miami, things like that.
Yeah, sure.
I don't know that we know a whole lot about Michigan, Ohio State, which to me, like, I know it's maybe the biggest rivalry in all of sports, and I'm going to let you talk to that. But it was eye-opening this year to see the reaction after that Michigan, Ohio State game, to the point that first round playoff game against Tennessee, I think it was, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there were a number of Tennessee fans there, right? Like, what does that Michigan, Ohio State rivalry, like, put that in context to our world of Alabama, Auburn, and things like that?
Well, Alabama and Auburn, because I went to my first Alabama Auburn game in that first year on Game Day, 1996. It was at Legion Field in Birmingham. And I'm just like, holy cow. But it's within one state. It's like bragging rights in the state and, of course, the nation. But it's you live in that state, you love Auburn or Alabama. At Ohio State, Michigan, it's like there's a line drawn. And Ohio State has had their times where they've been up. Michigan's had their times. And Ohio State had a long run with Tressel and Urban Meyer. And then Michigan back in 21 was able to kind of get it back. And what's happened is Ryan Day, as the head coach, Ohio State fans are just so trained that game is like a game by itself. No matter what happens before, no matter what happens after that game, with Woody Hayes and all the legacy stuff and the history of it. And that fan base has been indoctrinated into thinking you better win that game. And to the point that this guy, I think he's the winningest active head coach in the sport, Ryan Day. And after that Michigan game, and you saw the flag planting and the fight after, and it was his fourth straight loss. There were I don't want to exaggerate and say all of them, but there was a large vocal minority that if they could say fire him right now, the guys on the internet, they would have said fire him. It's like they're going to the playoff. No, I don't care. Fire him.
What at all?
Yeah, but that was where they were, and I'm not
But no,
exaggerating. I called the Ohio State Tennessee game, and you know Tennessee's going to travel to Mars to watch their team, but they have to have tickets to be able to get into the stadium. There had to be 30 to 40,000 people from Tennessee and and Bright Orange in Ohio Stadium to watch that game. And I think talking to Ryan Day on the field, you know, during that game and then after, I think the turning point for them was when they realized that a big percentage of their own fan base had turned on them. You ever see these Ohio versus the world sign? This was, I call it the locker room versus the world. This was not Ohio versus the world. Y'all aren't part of this. This is our locker room, and we're going to go on a 4-game run, and then that's where we're going to go after 4 games. They may not say that, but that's where their brain was after that Michigan game, because maybe Ohio State will change and realize it's almost like in NFL now. It's about getting to the playoff and making a run. But the Ohio State-Michigan game is sacred. It's like I said, it's how you're evaluated as a head coach on both sides for Ohio State and Michigan. And but yeah, they use that venom as a springboard into playing free and loose, throw havoc into the wind. Let's just let it roll. And if you watch them and how they played and the play calling of Chip Kelly from the Tennessee into the Oregon, Texas, and Notre Dame game, it was like watching a different team. And I think in the Michigan game, I think they're guilty of coaching and playing not to lose as opposed to just letting it rip. I don't know if Georgia or Florida has a game that comes to mind that's like you're kind of careful and, you know, as opposed to just who cares? Let's go. Let's play.
Before Kirby, it was Georgia, Florida.
Georgia, Florida?
Before Kirby. I'm telling you, we go to all the games, and then even my wife, she was like, we'd watching them warm up. She's like, what's wrong? Our boys don't look the same. We're scared. We're already scared. But here's when I knew, Denny, that the Ohio State-Michigan game is a different game. Is they're interviewing Ohio State fans in bars the week after they win it all. And they're like, I don't know. I'd rather beat Michigan. You're like, what? They're like, this year has an asterisk. You're like, what? We would give up.
That's not all Ohio State fans.
Right. Just all the ones in the bars that they interview. But it's enough of them that it's like a whole story. These are crazy people.
Yeah.
Because we would give up.
The lunatic fringe. That's
yeah. But I think it's a big fat fringe in Ohio State, though. There's some, you know.
Every fan base has that lunatic fringe. You know, I mean? Like Georgia has them. You know,
it's kind of shifting. It used to be Florida. Now we hate Alabama because, you know, they're always our nemesis.
Yeah. I tell you, I did the Georgia-Texas game this year. That was the game where Georgia looked like they were the Ohio State that was mad at everybody. Like, oh, you okay? That's how it is? Okay.
Yep.
And they took off. That's how Georgia showed up in Austin, at least defensively.
My favorite game you've ever done is the Georgia-TCU game at halftime. Oh, yeah. When you come back from the half, you're like, well, it was my favorite thing in the world, man.
I think Chris said, what do they got to do? I was like,
it was so, because I know you're trying to keep people to watch the second half, and you were like, man, I don't know. This was something.
Dude, this thing's been over since Stetson walked into the end zone to make it 7-0. I mean, this thing is over.
All right, I got a Stetson question for you. Why do you think Georgia was so reluctant to adopt Stetson? Like, if he was anybody else, we would have built the statue outside of Sanford Stadium already. I love the kid. What's the problem?
Well, was it JT Daniels, I think, that was there?
Yeah, you don't show up to Athens in a turtleneck. Somebody should jot that down.
Joe, you got to remember there was 5-star and USC and all that hype.
Jamie Newman.
And then who was the other one?
Jamie Newman. Remember from Wake Forest?
Newman, but there was another guy that was a 5-star that when they played Arkansas.
Yep. He went to Temple. He went to Temple after that.
Number 6. I can't. It was they gave him the reins before JT Daniels even got there, and I don't know if it was just I'm not in Athens, so I don't know if there was a personal thing with him. I just think they had a hard time getting over former walk on, and we got all these 5 stars stacked up. How is this guy playing? I don't know if it was his appearance, like he wasn't the typical Matthew Stafford looking guy or Carson Beck. I don't know, was that? I don't know. I've never seen a guy win a national championship, come back the next year, has another year, and they're like, oh gosh, I guess we'll have to deal with him one more year. Isn't Carson Beck ready? I mean, can't we? I'm like, what are you guys talking about? It's not like this guy's just handing off. Like Jake
Right.
Fromm his freshman year, he was doing a kind of a lot of managing and handing off and not a whole lot until late. He needed to start making some plays after that Auburn game. He started to make a few plays late in the year, but up to that point, he was just kind of like, don't make a mistake. Stetson Bennett, he was wheeling and dealing. I mean, he was scrambling and throwing seeds and showing some emotion. I mean, I don't know. That's of all the players I've ever covered, that's the one thing I'll never understand. This guy's probably the most decorated quarterback in Georgia history, and their fans are kind of like, I don't get it.
Yeah, I said to Joby last week, we talked about this, and I was like, I think he was a little bit of a victim of his story. Like they couldn't get that, like you said, that walk on tag off of him. Whereas if he had just been recruited and scholarshiped, I mean, he would be in the. I don't know if Georgia has like a ring of honor. I don't even know. Do college teams do that? But he would be that guy. But I think he did have a little bit of a victim of his own story there.
Yeah.
Two things real quick, and then I know we got to wrap pretty soon. We just talked about Ohio State, Michigan. And we just talked about how big of a rivalry that is. And Joby, I don't know if you caught when I was reading this earlier. He has a son, Chase, who I absolutely love, the hardest working kid I've ever been around in my life, going to Michigan. Now, I don't even need to say anything else. You just want to talk about that, Kirk? Like, I don't even know what to ask you.
So Chase, and Denny could tell you, Chase was a guy that going into his senior year, this past summer, we went around, visited some schools that had some initial interest, but it was really more of a, hey, maybe go as a PWO, North Carolina State, Penn State, Michigan, Notre Dame. They all offered him a PWO, the preferred walk-on kind of thing. So he was kind of on that fringe of being truly a guy that might get an opportunity versus a guy in this new world of 105, the scholarship number, or the guys on the roster. It's changing drastically right now. It just happens to be right now. They're voting on it in early April from a judge, which will change everything in the sport. And so coaches around the country they're kind of handcuffed. They don't really know how to handle this new situation. So we were about to call the SEC championship with Georgia and Texas, and we were at Mercedes-Benz Stadium to do our Friday night meetings with Kirby and Sark. And it was the week of National Letter of Intent was on Wednesday. Well, I didn't know the window closed. I wasn't even thinking of it. Friday night at midnight. Well, I'm sitting down with Kirby and my text keeps going off and we're taking notes and talking to him. It's me, Fowler, Coach Saban, Holly Rowe, one of my other sons, Jake. Chase is actually there. He couldn't travel all year because he had games, but that week he was done, so he was able to come. And taking notes. Kirby gets done. All right, Kirby, good luck, man. We'll see. But we had about 15 minutes until Sark came in. This is Friday, about 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock. I look at my phone, and it's a Michigan general manager or director of player personnel or whatever it is. And he says, can you give me a call? So I call him real quick. I had no idea what's up. He calls him. He's like, hey, are you with Chase? I need to talk to him. And we'd like to send him his paperwork. And the window closes at midnight and we want to send him his scholarship paperwork. Do you know how I can get a hold of him? And I said, yeah, he's right here. Hold on. I'll have him give you a call. So now Sark walks into the room. Keep in mind, I just got done with Kirby saying hi to Sark. I got this. Coach Saban's there. I kind of like doing sign language to Chase, like showing him like, you need to call this guy, And he's like, what? I was like, just call that guy. And so then we sit down with Sark. I look over my shoulder. We're in a suite looking over the field. I look over my shoulder and Chase is like in a corner talking on the phone. And then we talked for 30 minutes with Sark. And then Sark gets done. And then Chase is like, I just signed my paperwork. He's like, I'm going to Michigan. And I was like, holy, what? What? What just, okay. I said, all right. And it was it was surreal. Like Coach Saban was there. And I said, Coach, I said, Chase just signed with Michigan. He goes, what? He goes, he's going to Michigan? I go, yeah. He goes, well, he walks over to him real, you can just see Coach Saban real slow, puts his hand out. Congratulations, boy. Give him a hug. And I was just like, then we went to dinner at a steakhouse there in town. And it was all moving so fast. And he just took his visit a couple weeks ago. And I just think, now he had a great senior year. I'm not I don't ever brag on my kids. He had a really
No,
good
please
senior
do.
year.
Dad brag, man. This is it.
Yeah,
You don't get to do it on TV. I would brag. My kid played free safety. He was the captain of the team, led the team in tackles and interceptions. He's an absolute tyrant out there. Tell me about
That's
it. Let's
awesome.
go.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, my son is not your 6'4" Carson Beck guy. He's going to be the guy that's going to know the offense better than any quarterback in the room. Quarterback coach or offense coordinator say out of nowhere, Chase, what do you do here? And he'll be like, bang. He's going to be that guy. He's accurate, makes good decisions, can create. I'm not comparing him to a JJ McCarthy, but he's that mold as far as creating, scrambling, 3rd and 6, get 8, move the sticks kind of guy. That's just kind of his game. That and just in an era where players are more into social media and they don't really watch football, he's a throwback. He watches football. He's ate up with it, loves it, can't get enough of it. Would throw with Denny for 10 hours when they go down to Jacksonville. He's a guy that goes on spring break and he's like, I want to go down, see Denny and Will. I'm like, it's spring break. He's like, that's what I wanted. I've never in my life told him to throw. I don't tell him anything. I'm out of it. Ask Denny. I have nothing to do with anything. It's snow on the ground right now. There's a net we have out in our yard. It'll be 9:30 or 10 o'clock at night. He'll be out there working on something that Denny or Will told him about his front foot needs to get down or whatever they work on. And because I'm about to go to bed, I'm like, where's Che? And she's like, I think he's out front in the snow, shorts.
I love it.
And he's just throwing. And if he weren't my son, that's the guy I'm pulling for.
So tell me, how did senior year go? How'd he do? Tell me about his senior year.
His senior year went really well. He was a captain. The team that was like the big team in our area is Cincinnati Moeller, and they played them twice. And he had 2 really good games where, again, I think his composure, playmaking ability to run, throw, create, understanding of the down and distance, just the little things that I think are big with a quarterback. That's his like 10 out of 10. Now he's not 6'4". He's going to have to do it the old fashioned way. Ironically, he's going to a school where the number 1 ranked player, maybe in the history of quarterbacks, Bryce Underwood, is going to Michigan as a true freshman. He's an early enrollee. So Shea will probably be his biggest fan, advocate, working together. There's like 4 or 5 quarterbacks in that room up in Ann Arbor. And I think he's just thrilled to be part of it. He does every Tuesday and Thursday with the OC. They're starting to do install with the guys that are in Ann Arbor. They got Chase on a Zoom where he's able to kind of get in there and hear the terminology and write notes, and which is, I think, a huge advantage for him to be able to do that. So, he had Marcus Freeman at Notre Dame. He's like, Kirk, he's my number 1 PWO. You don't have to worry. I thought he's going to go to Notre Dame as a PWO, and then Michigan came in late with that offer. So excited. And again, it'd be like you having a son going to Florida. Like for me, this is his journey. Yeah. Even though my dad was a captain at Ohio State, I was a captain at Ohio State. My wife was a cheerleader at Ohio State. Che's been a brainwashed Buckeye who would cry after they would lose games his whole life. And he's going to Ann Arbor. He's already got Michigan hats and the wrist, the rubber, whatever those things are on his wrist. And he's all in. He's gotten rid of all of his Ohio State stuff.
He was down last weekend throwing Michigan balls. And I'm just like, Michigan man, this balls. Is so weird. Yeah.
Yeah. It's weird, because of the way, but he bought me a Michigan hat. Allie bought us Michigan football sweatshirts. I'm like, all right, let's take it easy.
Hey, Joby, I did learn something about myself, by the way, in his playoff game that Kirk was just referring to.
It was cold. Yeah.
Bro, I'm not built for that. I'm not built for that
I
cold,
was trying
bro.
to throw the ball. It was like 15, 20 mile an hour winds. It was sideways.
Raining sideways.
Like,
what was it? 20, 28,
yeah, it was like
29
in the low
degrees?
30s. Yeah.
I learned I didn't know how to dress. That was the
Oh, man.
I learned I didn't know how to dress, and the way I learned it is that exact reaction that Kirk just had, he had when he saw me. Like, bro, what are you wearing?
Right. Exactly.
No, man,
he goes up there, and honestly, Denny and Will Chase, like any young quarterback trying to create power. I never knew anything until I started watching Denny and Will. I know about quarterback play, but I don't know about the execution of a throw, like how to technically do it the way Denny and Will do. And Chase was a young guy that was trying to create power, like I'm sure a lot of young guys that he sees. And then we learned about how the ground and biomechanics and just how you can create force from your hips and the core, as opposed to trying to like make it that way with your arm. And it's been an interest. It's like learning, Joby, how to walk differently. Your muscle memories, you walk a certain way, and all of a sudden Denny's like, no, you need to walk like this. It's like, if I think about it, I guess I can walk differently. But my muscle memory, when the linebacker starts blitzing, I kind of revert back to what I know. So it's been a process for him to learn how to walk differently over these last couple of years. And he's still kind of making it so it is a muscle memory. But from where he was to where he is now, without us going down to Jacksonville, he wouldn't be having this opportunity. So
that's very nice. That's very nice. I'm going to respectfully disagree with you on that, because he's the hardest working kid I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, he is a hard worker.
And he definitely would have found his way, but that's very, very nice of you to say, Kirk. And listen, man, I can't even tell you, and Joby, I'm going to give you the end here, but I can't even tell you how appreciative I am of not just you doing this, but just, man, the whole family, Joby. When you meet these guys, it's just, you aspire to be what the Herbstreits have. And I'm not talking about job wise or money wise, or just real, man, just real people. And I truly have been blessed and lucky to be led into that, Kirk. And I appreciate not just you coming on here, but everything that I've witnessed and learned from you and the way you move in this space the last couple of years. It's impressive, bro. And you mean a lot to me. So I appreciate it. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, man. I appreciate that.
Of course. Joby, you want to end with anything? You got something else, and then we'll wrap it up.
Here's what lands on me. Yeah, go dogs. That's right. Yeah, the book of Philippians does say beware of the dogs, but I think it's talking about something else. So here's what lands on me, though, as you're talking. I bet there's a bunch of dads of sons and daughters that are going to be listening to this, especially with you on here, Kirk. And the Bible says to parents, train up a child in the way they should go, not in the way you want them to go. So Danny's a great example of this. I mean, he is the quarterback whisperer, and his son is not a quarterback. His son is the lighting director at my church. And so he builds out all the sets. He's a very artistic guy. You, Ohio State captain, send a guy to go play for Michigan. And the reason is because you don't put yourself in the middle, but you realize that you're a conduit of God to help that kid grow up in the way they should go. Mm-hmm. Because if you get in the way, what you're going to get in the way of is what God has for them. So to all those dads out there trying to overcoach and overguide your kid to be the athlete you never were, maybe you should just be a conduit of the grace of God to train them up in the way they should go, and then trust God with the future of your kid. We'll end with that.
Joby, that's a great one. Having 4 sons, I had to have to look in the mirror moment, because I'm ultra competitive. And I understand the dads that struggle with this. And I call it the Earl Woods syndrome. When Tiger Woods went on, Johnny Carson or whatever show he went on when he was like 3 or 4, and he hit a golf ball, I think my generation or our generation of parents saw that and said, that's what you got to do. And they started to take their kid, they took away the childhood of the kid and filled it with hitting lessons, speed lessons, like all this stuff. And I think what happens in that case is we start to want to put our own expectations that we have for them, and we start pushing and pushing. And I started, thank goodness I had this moment, right? That my twins, or my oldest, were like 8 or 9. And I was like, it was baseball, and I was coaching them. And I looked in their faces and I said, oh my gosh, I'm that guy. I'm that guy. And I stopped coaching. I went up into the stands and I said, it's too important for me. I want to have a relationship with these guys when they're 25, 30, 35, and 40. I want us to be boys. I want to go on fishing trips. Like, I want to hang out. And I do not want them to resent me and me pushing my own agenda and forcing them to do something they don't want to do because they don't maybe have the passion for it the way I did. And I'm going to make them have the passion for it. Man, I'm so grateful that God gave me that lens to see that, because my competitive spirit would have probably ruined the relationships with my kids. So by the time I learned, I think, with my twins, and by the time I came with my next son, Zach and Chase, you can ask Denny, like, if they throw, like, you would think I never played football. When I'm with Denny, I don't, we get in the car and it's like, you guys want to go to that taco place, or like, where do you guys want to go eat? You want to go see a movie? Like, I am not, Chase, I thought you did a really good job there. I have no idea what I'm talking about. So I just shut up, and he's a kid that is driven, but I would just say to all the dads, I get it. I'm not talking down to you. I was one of those dads. And I think sometimes our competitive spirit does some things to us that aren't going to benefit us with our relationship with our boys down the road. So I would just implore you to kind of look at your relationship with your kid. If your kid's the one asking you to go throw, or your kid's the one that wants to get better, great. But if you're making him do it the way I did with my twins early, I would just tell you now, you're so much better off taking a step back and not, you're going to ruin that relationship. And that's a hard thing to overcome. And that relationship, just father to son, is so much more important than Little League baseball or football or any of that stuff. So
I want to record that and just put that on a loop in our facility. I mean, that's so well said. And by the way, Joby, that taco place that he's talking about, Taco Lou, right there by the church.
Let's go.
Oh man, our everybody that comes from out of town lights that place up. I'm always going to give them love here.
By the way, I need to go to the new bowling when we were down there.
Yeah.
There's a brand new bowling place, and we tried to go in, and they're like, "No, it's not done till maybe Chase and Allie went last week." But
yeah,
I want to
the owners go to 11:22. So you let me know when you're here. We'll go bowling. Yeah.
Okay, let's do it.
Yeah.
That'd be a blast.
Well, I'm gonna wrap this up just by telling everybody, like, if you like this, please share it. Please, leave a nice review. But at the end of the day, we're just doing this to get good information. And Joby and I said, last week, if nobody even listens to this, like, we just want to have dope conversations with dope people. Like, that's the goal of this thing. And Kirk, you delivered on this, man. It's exactly what we wanted. So I appreciate it. And hopefully everybody got something out of that. And you are welcome on this, obviously, anytime that you want to come on and have something to say.
Yeah. Well, let's break it down. We'll break it down in the summer, or August, September, break down preseason next year.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Like a special Georgia Bulldogs edition. Just for Joby.
Exactly. Exactly.
All right, guys. Well, I appreciate it. And until next time, this has been the Built for More podcast with Denny Thompson and Pastor Joby Martin and special guest Kirk Herbstreit. Thanks, guys.
Yep.